Awesome. So I usually get started a few minutes after the hour just because I know life is crazy. And so sometimes it takes people a little bit to get on, but I also want to be respectful of your time and our time. So we won't wait too long. But while we're doing it, feel free to chime in about where you're from. We've got some Missouri folks, we've got some Virginia folks, and South Carolina, Pennsylvania, more Pennsylvania. I grew up actually. Oh, look, Jonah Schneider. I am Jeremy Schneider. Uh, Jonah grew up is in Montgomery, PA. I grew up in Philly. Spent most of my life in Philly up until I went to New York. So that's really great. I love that. I also just love it when there are more Schneiders all over the place. Um, Tonight, as you can see, we're going to talk about shame, and hopefully, I'm going to help you kind of really get a better understanding of that. The way that I do these workshops is it'll be particularly these workshops, these free workshops I do monthly, are much more focused on me presenting information to you and helping you understand it. And then I'll get to some practice elements that you can do on your own. And because of the way they're set up through Zoom, they're webinars so that I can't see your faces. We can't actually communicate verbally with each other. The hand raising doesn't really work, but you can submit questions via the Q&A feature, which is if you don't know where that is on your Zoom bar, if you don't see the Q&A feature or the Q&A box, you can go to the three dots, I think it is, click on that, and then you can click it open. And what's nice about the QA feature is that not only can you submit questions, but you can see other people's questions, and you can even like chime in on them and say you also want that answer or whatever. So we are, let's see. Oh, look at that. I did start a little bit early. So it's just the top of the hour. So we've got another couple of minutes. Vicky's from Colorado Springs. Um, I recently drove across the country in January, and I didn't get to go to that middle part. So if I drive across the country again, I'm going to definitely spend some time in like that Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah area. I really like that, the landscape out there. Got more New York, more Toronto. Excellent. One of the things I really like about sharing where we're coming from is one of the key tenets of self-compassion. Excuse me, there's kind of three primary components of self-compassion. One is the being kind to ourselves, treating ourselves the way that we would treat other people that we care about. Another is kind of a mindfulness awareness and being able to kind of reflect on what we're feeling and experiencing and be kind to ourselves about that. The middle one is more about an awareness that we're not alone in the world with our suffering, with our struggling, with our difficulties. And I feel like this is such a great example that we've all joined together in whatever time it is on a Thursday evening to come together to learn about a particular issue. And there are people from all over the country, in two countries even, all coming here for the same thing. And the next time that you feel alone, the next time that you feel like maybe you're the only one struggling with this, I hope you can look back on this workshop and think about just the list of people that have been calling out where they're coming from, where they're calling in from, and realizing we're all struggling with the same kinds of stuff. And even though we feel so incredibly isolated when we're struggling, the reality is there's so many of us out there that are also struggling at the same time. And I think not that there's comfort in that other people are struggling, but that there's comfort that we're not alone. And it's comfort that we're not the only one, that it's not that there's something wrong with us. It's that there's kind of something wrong with the way the world is. And some of us have more difficulty with that than others. That's my little spiel about why I like the introducing yourself part of the workshop. So why don't we get ourselves going? You know about introducing yourself. I hope you will continue to do that. Please also remember that you can submit questions via the Q&A. Again, if you don't know where the Q&A is, there's three dots on the Zoom bar, and then you can open it up and you can find it there. Just throw in as many questions, ideally somewhat related to the topic at hand, but certainly anything related to mental health is going to be fine. I do not check the chat during the workshop because I won't be able to focus, and that would be bad, and it wouldn't be a really good use of you watching me constantly lose my place of my train of thought. So I won't be checking the chat. So if you have questions, the best place to do that is the Q&A feature. However, if you just want to chat with each other, I find that a lot of the time these chats are very supportive and understanding. And there are some people that have been to my workshops more than once, and so have maybe a better idea of some of what I'm talking about than others. So if you have a question about that, I have found that repeat attenders are some of the nicest people on the planet. And I am grateful for them joining me each week. And so they'll probably give you a good idea of what I'm talking about if for some reason you don't understand. But again, you're always welcome to ask questions. Tomorrow, it's funny, for the longest time I would say by 12, but um, I'm now on the West Coast, and so 12 is really my 9, and I'm not going to get this out to you by 9 o'clock. So by 12 Pacific time, I will be sending around either an email or a post on Meetup about free access to the recording and the slide deck. So you'll be able to have all of this tomorrow. You don't have to worry about taking notes or anything like that. I really just want this to be as easy for you as possible. So let's get started. We're going to talk tonight about how shame infects your life and what to do about it. I think one of the real challenges of shame, and I'm going to get into what I call the three cruel tricks of shame, but one of the challenges of shame is that shame lives stronger and more powerfully when it's in the dark. And for me, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Oakland, California, and the sun is still shining. And that seems like the best time to talk about shame, where we can hold it up to the light and find out that it's not nearly as powerful as we have always thought it was. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a licensed master of social work. I am also have a master's degree in family therapy. I'm a certified life coach. I run a company called Build on Your Strengths. That's kind of my thing. That's my lifelong passion. I teach really practical tools about dealing with emotional triggers, how to do better with self-compassion, self-care, staying present when your past shows up. I do these free workshops every month. I do a coaching intensive every month on a particular topic. I'll get to that one. I'm going to do internal family systems. I'll explain more about that at the end. And then I also do coaching groups, which is just a monthly coaching group where a few of us come together and kind of get support on issues that we're dealing with. And then I also do individual coaching. My memoir is coming out later this year. It's called In My Rearview Mirror. And I also do a lot of work around AI and mental health. And I have a Psychology Today column on that very topic, which I will include in the links of things. If for some reason that interests you, you're welcome to explore my writing on that as well. So we're going to talk about tonight, we're going to talk about what shame actually is, particularly understanding the difference between shame and guilt. And then what I really want to emphasize is how to recognize shame's voice, what shame sounds like in your head. And then I'll go through 4 practical tools you can use to kind of combat shame. And then we'll be emotionally drained and you can take a break and maybe have some chocolate or something. And I think that will be good for all of us. So let's start with what shame is. According to the American Psychological Association, shame is a highly unpleasant, self-conscious emotion arising from the sense of there being something dishonorable, immodest, or indecorous in one's own conduct or circumstances, which really I expect more from the American Psychological Association. That's not exactly the best definition of shame that I've ever heard. But essentially, with what it's saying is that shame convinces you there's something fundamentally wrong with you as a person. It targets who you are, your sense of identity, your sense of self. It's not related to your actions. And to clarify that a little bit further, that's really how you can tell the difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is actually a really useful experience to have, right? I inadvertently hurt someone I care about. I feel guilt about it. I go to them and apologize and I say, I'm really sorry I did that. I will try not to do that again because you're important to me and your feelings matter to me. That's guilt. I did something wrong. I'm sorry about that. That has a real healthy value in relationships. Shame is about thinking we are wrong, thinking that there's something fundamentally wrong with who we are as a human being. It says that we're flawed, that we're broken, that we're not good enough. And that's what makes shame so challenging, is because it the weight of it that we carry around, often without even realizing it, is an enormous burden. And again, the difference is like guilt says, I made a mistake and I want to do something about it. Shame is, I am a mistake and there's nothing I can do to change that. This is the way I will always be. Just think about like the weight of those words. That's what so many of us carry around when it comes to shame. What I want to spend a lot of time on tonight is helping you understand the kind of language that shame uses and what shame sounds like. So you can begin to really see, oh, wait, that's shame. That's not me. That's not who I am. And that really shame is just a lie about our fundamental worthiness. To be honest, I'm still dealing with shame. I'm pretty sure I always will. It wasn't until my mid 40s when I was working with a therapist, they asked me if I knew what shame meant. And at that point, I had been in therapy for decades and I had a master's degree in family therapy. And I still didn't know how to describe shame because I was so immersed in shame, I didn't even understand it to be able to explain it to somebody else. So this workshop for me is a real something of a coming of age moment, right? This is me realizing I have come far enough in this journey in dealing with shame that I can actually hopefully help you get further along in your process. When I'm thinking about shame and sort of understanding why it was so hard to deal with, I came up with the three cruel tricks that shame uses to infect our life. So let's take a look at those just to begin to help you understand why shame can be so challenging. Shame's first cruel trick is that it operates beneath the surface of your awareness. If we knew that what we were thinking and feeling was shame, it wouldn't have anywhere near the power that it does. And it's ironic because I feel like I had a hard time uh, marketing this workshop because there are so many people that don't even realize they're dealing with shame enough to think, huh, a free workshop on shame, maybe that could be helpful. Kind of wild, right? Shame gets so deeply embedded in the way that we think and the way that we feel that we don't even see it. And impacts our thoughts, it impacts our feelings, and then, of course, impacts our behaviors. All with us thinking that's who we are, when in reality, that's just something that we learned. It's something that we developed. It's not about who we are. The second cruel trick, and this was the hardest one for me to deal with, is that it mimics your voice. And what I mean by that is when shame says things like, I'm not good enough, it sounds like that I'm saying that. It sounds like I'm saying I'm not good enough. And when I say I'm not good enough, it must be true. And if it must be true, then one, that means there's something wrong with me. And two, it means that I need to do all of this other stuff to make up for the fact that I'm not good enough. But in reality, that's a thought based on shame. And I'll talk about how these thoughts develop in a moment. But I just want you to understand that it sounds like your voice, it mimics your voice. And that's why we take it so seriously. That's why we think of it as fact. But these harsh judgments are born from traumas, and they're not actually realistic assessments of who we are. They're just internalized messaging that we've picked up along the way as we grew up. For those of you who've been in other of my workshops, I talk a lot about the importance of self-awareness. And self-awareness is obviously very key in being able to recognize shame's voice versus our own sense of self's voice. But so that's the second cruel trick of shame. The third cruel trick is we didn't create shame. We're not born with shame. Like, we're not born bad. We're not born broken. We're not born not good enough. We're born fine. However you want to interpret that, right? But we're born relatively free. But it's through the challenges and traumas and adversities that we experience growing up that we internalize these beliefs about ourselves that become shame. And in this third trick of shame, it's the people that hurt us, they're the ones that give us their shame. I'm not saying it's conscious per se, but people who are hurt tend to hurt other people, and that shame gets passed down from generation to generation. So you're probably dealing with shame that didn't even stem from anything that you experienced. It stems from what happened in your family for generations. So that's the third trick of shame. And again, what I really want to emphasize is you're not born bad. You're not born not enough. You're not born broken. These are things that we learn. But shame makes us think that that's true, when in reality, it's not. So let's talk about some of the ingredients of shame, the things that need to come together to kind of make this happen. The first is being a child, we're so completely dependent upon our parents or caregivers for survival, for their love, attention, and support. When we don't get that, a series of things kind of goes into effect. So first ingredient is that sense of dependence, which all children have. Then our caretakers, our parents, do something either that is hurtful or intentionally hurtful or accidentally hurtful, right? Sometimes just people aren't healthy enough to be parents. They're not abusive or mean. They're just not together enough to be able to care for someone else in a healthy way. So whether that's really abuse, real significant trauma, whether it's just withdrawing, whether it's criticizing, ignoring, unpredictable reactions, that disconnect between what a child needs and what a child gets is a major ingredient in terms of shame. And then this third component, and I hope this really makes sense to you, is a child is not able, like we can look back and say, oh, you know what? Maybe my dad was not really as good at being able to handle emotions as I would have liked, but like I get that now and so on and so forth, and things have changed and we talk, whatever that is for your situation, right? But as a kid, you don't have that ability, right? You just think they're not meeting my needs. And when they're not meeting your needs, you have two options. As a kid, you have two options. One is, well, it's their fault. They don't really know what they're doing. That's on them. Or it must be me. I need to figure out how to make that better. You can imagine most kids choose that second option. And I don't mean it as a choice, but that's what we go with. And we go with it for that fundamental reason that it gives us some sense of control. Because being a kid in a difficult situation where our needs are not getting met is extremely challenging. It's extremely upsetting. And it literally impacts our developmental capabilities. For us to think, oh my goodness, my parents are failing me, there's something wrong with them, there's no way out of this situation, I'm going to be like this forever, is a horrifying thought to comprehend. And kids can't really do that. That level of uncertainty and instability is so dangerous. So, what we do as kids is we assume it must be us. It must be me. If I could just do something more, if I could just be more, if I could be less, maybe they'll give me what I need. Maybe then they'll love me. Maybe then they'll pay attention to me. That's what shame is. Shame is that sense that there's something fundamentally wrong with me. And if I could just be better, more something, then I would get the love that I want. That's where shame comes from. Let's talk a little bit about how shame takes root. As I mentioned, it's not always just from like the more stereotypical abuse or harsh punishment, right? It stems from that emotional unpredictability. When a child doesn't know whether or not they're going to be loved, whether or not they're going to get the attention that they need, whether or not their parent or caregiver is going to respond calmly or irrationally, or in anger, or in tears, or in violence. That unpredictability is a disaster for a child. And a child will figure out in their own head, obviously not consciously, but will figure out, hey, if I could just be this, maybe I could help them be more calm. Because a child thinks that it's on them. We talked about caregivers' unprocessed shame and how that passes on. And then there are all kinds of family traditions, as I call them, right? Elements of a family system that where things like emotions are not acknowledged or expressed, where forcing children to internalize difficult feelings is rather common. And the thing is, children absorb all of this because of that key sense of dependence, right? We're so dependent on our parents or caregivers for every single thing that we need that if they fail us, we have to assume it's our fault because then that gives us some illusion that it could get better. But if we think, oh my goodness, my parents are failing me, they can't do this, we can't function. We're just not able to do that. So I hope that helps you understand kind of where shame comes from. When I talk about we're not born with shame, we're not born believing we're not good enough. We're not born believing that we're broken. That's essentially a learned behavior because of the experiences we had. That's how they've developed. And again, what I'm hoping tonight, you're not going to be free of shame, right? But if we can loosen its hold a little bit, if we can loosen its power a little bit, and we can help you shine a light on it when you need to, that would be extraordinary. And then you can keep working on it. So now that you understand what it is and where it comes from, I really want to take a little bit of time and really see about how you can begin to develop your own sense of awareness on what shame looks like for you. And then we'll talk about how you can really begin to combat that. So let's first talk about the patterns of shame. I've touched on some of these already, but I think it's important to relay it again. First is just like what we talked about earlier, it attacks your sense of identity. It's not a statement about something that you've done wrong. It's a statement about how you are wrong, right? It makes sweeping statements about your character rather than just specific behaviors, right? It's not like, oh, I made a mistake in this workshop. It's, I can't do workshops. I'm not good enough to do workshops. I shouldn't do workshops, right? That's the force of shame. Shame feels permanent, right? Just like when we think about that distinction between guilt and shame, right? I made a mistake. I could probably do better next time, or I'm going to learn from it. So I do better next time. That shame gives it a sense of permanence, right? I'll never be successful. I am not able to do this. I'll never be able to get that done. That sense of it, I'll always be like this is a hallmark of shame. The other kind of nasty thing apart about this is that shame then creates a sense of withdrawal, right? When you feel such intense shame about who you are and that there's something fundamentally wrong with you, it's so hard to imagine reaching out to a friend and think that they might care. It's hard to imagine, like, oh, I should go to that party because there's lots of people there that like me. But when we feel such intense shame, we don't think people like us. And so we withdraw even more, which makes us feel more isolated, which makes us feel even worse. These are the patterns of shame. And I think once you can start to recognize some of these patterns, and then we're going to talk about the language that it uses. Once you start to recognize some of the language that it uses, it'll become easier for you to notice it and be able to respond. So let's spend some time, as painful as this will sound, let's spend some time really thinking about the kinds of things that shame says. I've, I'll be completely honest with you, I've rehearsed this. It's really hard to say them all, but I think it's important that you hear them from my voice as well as read them. So you can begin to see that when it sounds in your head, that it's not real. So I broke them up into groups. So core inadequacy, I am not enough. I am broken. I am not worthy. I don't belong. I feel pretty confident that most of us in this virtual room have heard at least one of those. I want you to try and make a note. You don't actually have to write it down if you don't want to, but make a note of the ones that sound like they're in your head as well. I'm going to pause here because Tracy asked a really good question. If we don't like how shame feels, why do we spiral and pull more negative evidence in to make it worse? Right? Logically, Tracy's of course right. Why would we do that? Problem is we're not thinking logically when we're coming from a place of shame. Shame is built to undermine us, right? That we learn that we are not enough. We believe that there's something fundamentally wrong with us. That's what gets us to spiral. That's what gets us to pull in more negative evidence. It's when we have the awareness to be able to say, whoa, that's shame. And we're going to talk more about this, but whoa, that's shame. That's a thought stemming from shame. That's not a thought stemming from me. That's when we can begin to create some distance and be able to follow our own way of thinking about it instead of the way that shame thinks about it. I hope that helped. The next category, self-disgust. I am dirty. I am disgusting. I am a terrible person. A lot of shame revolves around a sense of worthlessness or helplessness. So I can't do anything right. I am useless. I'm a burden. There's also, I should be better. I'm a failure. Everyone is progressing and I'm being left behind. And a deservingness of things that are bad. I deserve this, whatever the bad thing that happened. I am a disappointment. I deserve all the things that come my way that aren't good. I just want you to take a moment to just think about like what do any of those thoughts sound familiar to you? Again, you don't have to answer publicly. Just take a moment. Do any of those thoughts sound familiar to you? Now, you believe those thoughts because of the three cruel tricks of shame. You believe those thoughts because you learned to believe those thoughts because of what you went through, because of what you experienced. The fact that I can know those thoughts that you also have, and that you can know those thoughts that I also have, is also a sign that it's probably not just us. It's something else that's going on, right? I wasn't born bad. You weren't born bad. It's not who we are. It's what we learned because of what we experienced. So again, I hope this helps you to see that these thoughts, even if they feel true, still aren't true. That these thoughts are not facts. It's essentially a learned behavior that we developed growing up through a really challenging, difficult time. But it doesn't actually mean anything about who we are and what we're capable of. Okay, so now let's look at the tools. I always find that part really intense. The tools will be a little bit more upbeat and positive, hopefully, because we'll feel some sense of hope. It's another thing that shame is good at. Shame kind of drowns out hope. So let's move to the hope phase of this workshop, and we'll do that together. So the first thing that I want to try and talk about is thinking about translating. We have shameful thoughts, and then we leave them unquestioned as if they're valid and true. part of what we'll do over the next few minutes, 10 minutes, is begin to challenge those thoughts, really question them, right? We just take them for granted because we thought they were ours. For the longest time, I really thought I was too much. Like I just and I had gotten to the point where I had accepted that. I was like, I am too much. I'm too much for other people, and there are people that just can't handle me, and that's just the way it is. And then I realized that was crap, that that was shame talking, and that shame had convinced me, and I had stopped questioning it. So these are some of the things that I've been able to use, and I think that they will be helpful to you. The translation service essentially converts shame thoughts into realistic, fair, and compassionate interpretations. Again, it's the idea that we don't just have to accept the shame thoughts that we've had. We'll have them, right? They'll happen, but then we can address them and respond to them and translate them and challenge them so that they don't hit us as hard. And the more we do that, the less impact it will have on us. So let's look at a couple of examples. I'm too much. So when you say I'm too much, right? And that's what I talked about, right? I'm too much. I felt I was too much because the people that were supposed to care for me when I was growing up didn't do a very good job. And I thought that was a statement about me. I thought that meant that there was something wrong with who I was. But in reality, that was about their limitations, maybe their discomfort, certainly about the parenting they received. But it actually wasn't a statement about me. So the whole reasoning behind why I think I'm too much kind of falls apart when I actually start to look at it. I'm not good enough. Translation, I learned this because I couldn't seem to do enough to earn consistent love and approval. But this was their failure. This was their inability. This was their shortcomings. This was not about me. You can see the running theme here, right? I'm broken. It's such a strong one. I'm broken. I'll never be okay. You can say to yourself, I'm hurt. I've been hurt. I've been through a lot. I'm not broken. I survived. I've made it this far, which is pretty incredible considering what we've all been through. There was never actually anything wrong with me. It's only what was wrong was what happened to me. Right? There's not really anything wrong with you. What you went through is wrong. And it's unfair that you have to deal with the consequences of that. But that doesn't mean that you're broken or that you're not good enough or that you're too much. It just means that what you went through was too much. What you went through was wrong. This, again, you do this once, it's not going to change your life, right? You're going to have to do this repeatedly over and over again, right? You've been learning this belief for probably decades. It won't take decades to change it, but it's going to take more than a few days or weeks, probably, right? But just keep practicing this process and it will start to make a difference. And the way that I think about things like this is that shame is an enormous weight that we all carry. Even if you can only remove a tiny bit of that weight at a time, within a few weeks, that weight will be a little bit lighter. And that weight being lighter means you'll have a little bit more energy to do other things that actually feel good. And the more you keep doing this, the smaller weight shame will take, and the more freedom you will have to do the things that you enjoy. It just means starting. very small scale. I touched on this already, but like this is going to take some time, right? You're going to need to practice this over and over and over again. And just as with so much of what we talk about, please remember to do self-compassion because I you just can't, first of all, you can't do too much self-compassion. Self-compassion, there's enough research out there about the power of self-compassion and the way that it positively impacts not just your life, but the way your brain functions, that I would just practice self-compassion every single day and you'll start to see changes that are beneficial for you. But be understanding, this is a hard process. You're literally shifting decades of learned thinking. It's going to take a little time. Doesn't mean you can't do it. Doesn't mean it's not worth it because it's totally worth it. It's just going to take a little time. This is one of my favorite ones, the quarantine method. I got this idea from basically thinking about shame as spam. And, we have these thoughts that come into our heads, and some of those thoughts are just ridiculous. Shame thoughts are ridiculous. We've just believed them 100% for so long. But in reality, they're just ridiculous thoughts. Why the hell would I think that I'm broken? Right? Why on earth would I not be good enough? Of course I'm good enough. You're good enough. We're all good enough, right? But we've taken them so seriously for so long, we can't even look at them that way. So translation, right? That translation process, that's when you have a little bit of time to really sit down and do it. But sometimes shame hits you in these difficult moments just before something big, like a big meeting, or you're about to have a big conversation with a partner or a family member or something, and this shame pops up and you recognize it, but you don't have time to really deal with it. That's where I think the quarantine method comes in. So you notice the shameful thought. Awareness is always the first step, right? Awareness is the most important thing you'll ever learn in terms of your mental health. Recognize this shameful thought has happened. Any of the thoughts that we reviewed earlier that I said out loud, any thoughts that you thought about, and um, and just grab it. And I literally kind of do this visually. I'm not sure why. I grab it as if the thought is outside my head. I label it, oh, that's a shame thought, or that's the inner critic, or whatever it is, and I move it aside. I'm literally just like dragging and dropping it into the spam box. However you want to do that, that works for you is the way that you ought to do it. I'm just telling you what works for me. But you can decide to address it later. Be like, you know what? I'm going to translate that shame thought later on today. But for right now, I'm just moving it into quarantine and I'll worry about it later. Or frankly, just leave it there and it doesn't matter. But this is kind of one of those like down and dirty methods. You have a shame thought, you realize it's a shame thought, you don't have time to deal with it, just move it to quarantine. We're not adding it to the weight of shame we're already carrying. We're moving it to quarantine. It's not our problem right now. The logic check is another method, and this is similar to the translation service, but a bit different process in terms of that there's three questions that I'll want you to ask. So the thing is, shame pretends to be so logical, and this kind of goes back to, I mean, this goes back to Tracy's question about kind of why do we, if we don't like shame so much, why do we then do the things that shame wants us to do, which essentially kind of get more negative and find more negative evidence? And that's because that's actually shame working in a very logical, rational way, making it seem like we're handling this fair and balanced in a totally calm and non-judgmental way, when in reality, it's based off of the idea that is incorrect. There isn't something wrong with us. So, one of the ways to combat shame is to combat it with its own kind of logic. So I think about these three questions to ask. One, who decided this? Where did this belief actually originate? We know from tonight's workshop that it often traces back to specific people or parents, events, experiences of our childhood. This is not something that started last week. This is not something that started last year. This is something started when our brains were still developing. Who decided this? What's the actual evidence? Is this objectively true, or is this an interpretation shaped by shame? What would a neutral observer say? I always like this one. What would a neutral observer say? If someone was actually taking an assessment of my life, would they really look at me and go, oh, yeah, you're totally not good enough? I mean, look at the way we've balanced out what you've done that matters and what you've done that doesn't matter. Yeah, you're not good enough. Like, no neutral observer is going to come up to us and tell us that we're not good enough. But we believe it because that's what shame has taught us. That's what our traumas have taught us. So, what's the actual evidence? And then the third one, and this is bringing in that self-compassion component. Would I say this to someone I love? For me, I always think about my kids, right? If one of my kids came up to me and said, Dad, I don't think I'm good enough, would I be like, yeah, that's probably true. I'm really sorry. Like it hurts me to even jokingly say that, like that's just not true. So why would it be true for us? It's not. So if you wouldn't say that to someone that you love, then we wouldn't say it to ourselves. And frankly, if I wouldn't say it to you and you wouldn't say it to me, why would we say it to ourselves? It it just doesn't hold up. That's the thing. Like shame comes across as logic and rational, but when faced with actual logic and rationality, it doesn't hold up. So I put it together an example that we could do that I can walk you through it. So one of my shame thoughts is I'll never make my business successful. I'll never be able to build this business. I hate it. It's very annoying. It's frustrating and anxiety producing. But let's walk through the questions. Who decided this? Well, I mean, it comes back to my parents and the way that I grew up. That lack of love and affection made me feel I wasn't worthy. That lack of sense of self-worth makes it very hard for me to believe that I can achieve anything. But that's not about me. That's not about who I am. That's a reflection of what I experienced. That's the impact of what I experienced. Is there evidence to support the fact that I can't run a business? Like I've had trouble trying to run businesses in the past. I often have problems, but I also keep trying to figure them out. I love what I'm doing. I'm really, I'm really lucky to be able to do it. Maybe there's not really evidence to support the fact that I can't build a successful business. Would I tell a 10-year-old they're doomed to fail? Of course not. Would an objective observer think, oh, yeah, Jeremy probably can't make a business successful? That's pretty clear. I don't think so. I mean, I'd like to think most of you probably don't think don't worry about whether I'm going to be successful in this business or not. And you don't even really know me yet. So, like, it just doesn't hold up, right? So I go through this process and it's like, okay, that's really annoying. It's frustrating that I think that way, but it's clearly not true. I'm going to be fine. And it just doesn't, I don't end up carrying the same weight of shame that I had if I just had that thought and then didn't address it, if I didn't run the logic check against it. And then there's the self-compassion piece. And I touched a little bit on about self-compassion. I'm sure there's a better way to say that sentence. Uh, but self-compassion isn't just about being nice to ourselves. It's self-compassion is treating ourselves the way that we would treat people we care about. Again, I always reference my kids in this way, right? Like if if I wouldn't say something to my kids, then why would I say that to myself? I deserve the same care and love that my kids get from me. Only seems fair. If you don't have children, but you have family members, you have friends that you care about and love, use one of them as an example. Would you talk to them in that way, the way that you just talk to yourself? If not, then we could be more self-compassionate. But self-compassion, the practice of self-compassion also helps manage our nervous system and it turns off the fight or flight response from our amygdala. And that's really powerful because when we are overactivated, everything is harder. When we are cut back into nervous system regulation, everything is a bit easier. So there are a lot of reasons why self-compassion is really important. A simple self-compassion practice is, and I think a lot of you have heard me say this, is putting your hand over your heart. Putting your hand over your heart, telling yourself that you're okay. I've got this. We're going to get through this. It's a really nice, simple way when you have some shame thought that you realize is not, that is actually shame. It's not real. Instead of getting escalated and activated about it, you can turn to self-compassion. So some examples, instead of I'm such a failure, I find myself saying things like, this is hard. I'm doing the best I can with what I have right now. I'm allowed to struggle. Struggling doesn't mean I'm doing it wrong. Also doesn't mean that I'm not happy or not making progress. It's just hard. Instead of saying something like, I should be over this by now, we can say things like, healing takes time. I'm working on it. Progress isn't linear, but I still make progress. And considering where I was, fill in the blank 6 months ago, a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I never dreamed life could be like this. Everyone else has it together. This is kind of what harkens back to what I talked about earlier when asking people to put in where they're from in the chat, right? Like, oh yeah, everybody else has it better. Like I'm the only one that's struggling. Isn't that true? So many of us are struggling. Some sense of comfort in the idea that we're not alone. We're not the only one. And just because I'm struggling doesn't mean I'm bad. Just because I'm struggling doesn't mean there's something wrong with me. It just means life is hard. And life is hard. I don't think any of us could really dispute that. I think when we're kids, we think it's easy because we see these adults and they just seem fine. But they had it harder than we do, you know? I think the thing here is that we're not erasing shame with compassion. What we're doing is we're lightening the load of shame. We're using the translation tools, we're using the logic tech, the quarantine, the self-compassion to be able to reduce the weight of shame that we're carrying. Because as that weight gets lighter, the less impact it has on us. And the less impact it has, the more freedom we have to be who we really are underneath shame. So we talked about a few things today. Hopefully, you remember at least a couple of them. We, I hope that you have a better understanding of what shame is, that you can recognize its voice, some of the languages that it uses, and we reviewed the 4 tools. Again, shame thrives in silence. The more you name it, the more you shine a light on it, the weaker it becomes. What is wrong is not you. What is wrong is what you went through. And what you're dealing with is not a failure of who you are. It's the effects of the challenges and difficulties you experienced growing up. I hope tonight makes that just a little bit lighter for you. There are a couple questions. If you have other questions, please feel free to post them now. I'm going to go through a couple of things that I want to share with you about what I do and what's coming up that you might be interested in over the next couple of months. And then I'll get to the questions and any other questions that you may have. So if tonight resonated with you, this is what we could think about next. So a lot of people leave these workshops thinking, like, will I actually use this? Or I get it, but I don't know how to practice them. Or I don't want to do this work alone. So I've come up with these three approaches that you can use. And let me go through them. So the first one is in a coaching intensive. So this is 2 hours where it's not a workshop. I will explain to you the topic. So the next topic is in 2 weeks, and that's internal family systems, working with your parts for anxiety and inner conflict. I will talk to you about it, but then we will spend a good hour, if not more, on actual practice. We're going to run through being able to identify different parts that come up for you. We're going to practice dialogues that you can use to be able to help calm your parts. I'll talk about, we'll talk about keywords and phrases that help you learn when parts have taken over and also how you can better connect with yourself. And we'll do a lot of that together. So these coaching intensives are much more about practice and learning and less about lecture and education. They're 2 hours instead of 1 hour. The cost is $45. This little bee here keeps showing up every once in a while. It's incredibly annoying. Um, you can just go to jgs.net/intensive, and that will take you to the meetup if you want to learn more about it, or you can always just ask me any questions. Um, Good. Someone asked about parts. So internal family systems, the idea is that it's a therapeutic model for particularly healing from trauma. The idea is that we're born with a sense of self, a core self, and as we grow up in childhood, whenever we experience difficulties, adversities, challenges, traumas, parts break off and do some sort of protective action to try and keep our sense of self safe. They learn these behaviors, and then and that really helps protect us growing up. But when we're older, when we're adults, those parts still behave in the same way. And it's when you find yourself like in a moment of conflict, feeling like you're a child again, when you have panic attacks about something that might happen and you're feeling young, when you find yourself talking and realizing you're just like you're working from a script. It's like you don't even realize what you're saying until it's already out of your mouth. Those are all like signs that we're experiencing parts. All of us have it. It's not, there's nothing, this isn't multiple personality disorder. This isn't dissociative identity disorder. It's nothing like that. It's just a natural way that our psyche has helped to deal with traumas. What we'll be focusing on is teaching you more about that, but also actually how to recognize parts, how to connect with yourself, and how to have dialogues with your parts to help yourself feel better, calm down, particularly from anxiety and stress. These groups are limited, so there's only about 15, maybe 20 people. Right now, I'm leaning towards just limiting it to 15 people, which means there's about maybe 5 or 6 spots still available. Um, And so it'll be a small group. Everyone will get a chance if they want. It'll be a meeting, Zoom meeting. It won't be a webinar, so we'll see each other. We'll be able to talk to each other. You can just sort of raise your hand and talk out loud. It'll be much more of a group feeling. So that's the coaching intensive. I've also started something called an integration circle. We've been doing that for a few months now. It's just a small group of us. Again, we'll be limiting this to a small group. This is maybe 10 people. The cost is $20. This is an hour. This is not a support group per se. This is what I think of as a coaching group. This is we get together once a month. Everybody kind of lets each other know how they're doing. If there's a particular issue that came up during the month that you're like, I really need to just talk this through. What could I have done differently? How can I handle it better next time? And I'll teach you right then and there tips and skills that you need to have or other ways of thinking about it that will help you get through it. So this is kind of the way I think about it. This is an in-between between the workshops, which are much more, as you can tell, lecture education focused, and individual one-on-one coaching, which may be like something that you don't feel ready for, but you'd like a little bit more support. That's why I created the coaching group. And then I do provide individual coaching. And the easiest way to get started is have a free clarity call. So I don't, hopefully you get a good sense for me from this workshop. But, if you haven't, but you're curious, I offer a free 30-minute call. I promise there's no sales pressure whatsoever. The way I structure these is it's like a mini session. You'll tell me what you want to talk about. We'll talk a little bit about it. If you have specific questions about how I handle it, I'm happy to answer them. But you'll kind of get a feel for what it's like to work with me. I won't even let you schedule. Even if you say to me, Jeremy, I really want to schedule with you, I won't let you schedule with me in that moment because I want you to think about it. I'll send you an email with my coaching agreement, which will cover some of the stuff I said anyway, just so you have that for your records. And then I'll send you the appointment link, a calendar link that you can use. If you want to schedule, obviously, I'd love to work with you and help, but that's the extent, right? You decide at that point, you get to think it over, you can respond. There's no pressure. It's just not my style. So let's look at what's coming up. So I talked about the coaching intensive on internal family systems. That's in 2 weeks. And it says here there's limited to 20, but there's only about, I'm probably limiting it to 15, and there's only about 5 slots or so left. That'll be 2 hours. Then a week after that is the integration circle. And then next month's free workshop is going to be on the art of sleep, how your daily self-care supports rest when you need it most. This is a free workshop. That'll be April 2nd at our normal time. And then the intensive for April is going to be on cognitive behavioral therapy. It's going to be change your thoughts, change your life. So this is going to be a real deep dive into cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, particularly looking at cognitive distortions, um, the the cognitive triangle, the CBT triangle. We'll be looking at a thought record. So we'll be actually, again, this will be real practice. We'll be doing this stuff together in that small group setting. There'll be another integration circle because that happens every month. And then the next free workshop is interactive journaling with AI, tools for self-awareness and growth. Again, that's free for everybody. That's in May. And then May's coaching intensive is a self-compassion coaching intensive. So if what I've talked about in terms of self-compassion interests to you and you really want to dive into it, this is your opportunity to do that. There's going to be, again, some education, but really a lot of time spent focusing on practicing self-compassion, thinking about when we need self-compassion, how to have that level of awareness. So that'll be really focused on that. And then there'll be in the end of May, again, there'll be the integration circle. So if you're just starting out, you're welcome to do whatever you want, but certainly I hope you come to the next free workshop, which we decided was going to be on sleep. If you're ready to really practice, you know what the three coaching intensives are coming up. If you're looking for that more ongoing connection and support, you know that you're working on this healing process, but you want to at least have some connection to other people who are doing it well and maybe a little bit more direct support. That's the integration circle. And then again, if you just are looking for one-on-one coaching, you can schedule a clarity call with me and we'll figure it out together. So, uh, again, if you have any questions, please let me know. Add them to the Q&A. There are a couple questions that I'm going to get to. So, can I recommend resources on self-compassion? So, the leading researcher on self-compassion is a woman by the name of Kristen Neff. She basically developed the whole research behind it. She's extraordinary. Um, she does a lot of stuff. I will include some like a link to her site in the email I send out tomorrow. But she's totally worth exploring. Because shame is rooted in attachment wounding, can you offer a brief explanation of how it shows up in an insecurely attached? So I'll be completely honest with you. I often struggle remembering all of the different attachment groupings. But yes, shame is deeply rooted in attachment and it's going to show up in the same ways, but it's going to also show up in how we, for lack of a better term, kind of try and make up for it, right? So those of us who believe that we're not good enough, we're going to strive for a level of perfection because that's the only way we can believe that someone would really see us as being good enough is perfect, right? For those of us that feel we're broken, right, that's going to show up in certainly there's going to be some self-sabotaging that goes on. There's going to be an inherent sense of like, I am not good enough for my partner. We're not equal. What they want is more important than what I want. So there are a lot of different ways that that comes up in that way. Probably not the best answer I've ever given in my whole life, but hopefully gives you some idea. Does shame show up on the face and body? I mean, that's a really good question. I would, I guess my sense is sure, it can be reflected in our posture, it can be reflected in our faces and bodies, it can be reflected in our tone of voice. But fundamentally, these are learned behaviors that impacted the way we think and experience the world. And so, sure, anything that does that will be reflected, but I don't think it's unique to shame that it reflects in our bodies, if that makes sense. Someone asked, can you feel shame from being overprotective? So you feel like you're not competent on your own? That's an interesting question. Let me give that a moment's thought. I'm going to say yes. I'm not sure it's the same type of shame that we would think about in terms of, early childhood traumas. But there is if I guess what I would think is if you feel shame from being overprotected, if you feel a sense of shame because it implied that you're not competent on your own, my guess, and this is just a guess, I literally don't even know your name, so I'm not in any way like diagnosing or evaluating you at all. But it makes me wonder if there might have been other issues that also could have contributed to shame, and that this is one of the ways that shame shows itself, if that made sense. So, I don't see any other questions. Nancy, thank you. I appreciate your kind words. If anyone else has any questions, time is ticking away. I wish I had the Jeopardy music. Da-na-na-na. Okay, you don't want to hear me do that. So I'm going to take it there are no more questions. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for joining me. I really hope this was helpful to you. I think you can tell how passionate I feel about facing shame and addressing shame. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Otherwise, I hope to see you in either a couple weeks at the IFS coaching intensive or at the integration circle at the end of the month or at the free workshop on sleep next month. Okay. Take care, everybody. Have a good night and enjoy your weekend.